Hello and welcome. 2017 is rapidly coming to a close here in a couple of weeks, and I have decided that it's time to finalize my 2018 priority reading list. So, it's been a work in progress for several months now. If you're not familiar with my reading plan, my reading style, what I do is throughout the year, I collect on a list books that I've come across that I think sound interesting or that I want to read. Or, in this case, this year, I really grouped this around themes, like themes that I was interested in reading about this year or next year for 2018. And then, I start putting together, curating a list that's a priority reading list that I will read off of starting in the beginning of 2018. I'll read off that until it is complete, and then following that, I do have a period of free reading where I just read sort of at will, and then that usually lasts a couple, 2 or 3 months. I usually have time for that, and then in December, I devote to rereading. So that's sort of my year of reading planned out. So this year, for my priority reading, I did wind up with 30 books again, just like 2017. As it turned out, there turned out to be 15 fiction and 15 nonfiction, which is a complete coincidence. This also happened to me back when I was doing my 2017 list at the end of 2016. I wound up just by coincidence with 15 fiction and 15 nonfiction on the priority read, must read list. So during my priority reading period, I do allow 5 interruption reads. So if I come across a book that I absolutely want to read that second, right away, I can interrupt my priority reading list for those types of books. I have 5 chances to do that. I already have 1 interruption read sort of in mind for 2018 that will be coming up, I think. But yeah, what I did, I mentioned this year I have sort of organized my priority reading around themes because when I was curating the list, it just sort of just seems how it was it just sort of evolved. So I'm going to split this videos up into 2. I will do the first 4 themes now in this video, followed by another video where I will cover the other 5 themes. So let's get to the first 4 themes. The first theme is books about books, and the first book on that list is The Library at Night by Alberto Manuel. By the way, this is not the order that I'm going to read the books. I am going to do a drawing like I did this year in 2017. I thought that was a lot of fun. So in 2018, I will be letting the randomness of the universe choose the order of reading. So I will have all of the books in a bowl, and I'll have I'll do a drawing every time I finish one book. I will do a drawing for my next book to be chosen. But yeah, The Library at Night by Alberto Manuel. I've owned this book for a couple of years. This was originally published in 2006. Someone gave me this book a couple of years ago, and I've never gotten it read. This 2018 is going to be my year to do that. This is all about libraries. This is a nonfiction work. It's about libraries of people who have struggled to keep libraries open, banned books, imaginary libraries, all sorts of different types of libraries. So I'm looking forward to this very much. And the next work on the list for books about books is Moby Dick as Philosophy by Mark Anderson, originally published in 2015. A couple of years ago, I read a book called All Things Shining that was about Western literature and finding meaning in life through Western literature. And one book that was talked about at length in that book was Moby Dick. And so I've read Moby Dick a couple of times, but after reading that book, I thought I really want to read a book about Moby Dick. And so 2018 is going to be my year to do that. This, I think, has several different levels. It's about Moby Dick itself, and then it's also about the different, I think, philosophies of here it says Plato, Melville, and Nietzsche. And then, it's just sort of how philosophy, I think, interacts with other creative arts. So I think that's going to be cool. So the next book on the list is called Testaments of Time. This is The Search for Lost Manuscripts and Records by Leo Deuel. I don't own this book yet. I ordered this book used, and it hasn't arrived yet, so this is a photo of it. I believe this might be out of print, but this book is all about the search for lost manuscripts back in the end of the Middle Ages or the beginning of the Renaissance, where there was this renewed interest in classical works, and some of these books had been lost for centuries. And then I think this also tells the story of books that were found quite by accident or saved in fragments, and I just think that's really fascinating. This book originally came out in 1965 and is considered a classic work in its field from what I could tell. So looking forward to that very much. The next book on the list is a hardcover book that I own, Books and Readers in the Early Church, A History of the Early Christian Texts by Harry Y. Gamble. Originally published in 1995. This book is all about, this book intersects several different interests of mine. I have an interest in early Christian history, and then early Christian history, occurred in the context of the Roman Empire, which is also an interest of mine. And then the Roman Empire existed in the wider Mediterranean sort of region, and the history of the Mediterranean region is another interest of mine. So this book sort of intersects three different interests of mine, and I'm really curious about how literacy existed among the early Christians, because I think I might have a preconceived notion in my head about what it was like based on some other things I've read. But the intellectual world was sort of remade of Europe following Christianity, the rise of Christianity. So I think that's sort of fascinating. So this book should explore that, and I'm looking forward to it very much. So that completes the theme of books about books. So we will move on now into the next theme, which is books about seekers. So I've always been sort of interested in seekers, those folks who are just out there just trying to find a different kind of life. And the first book I have on my list for this is, let me pull it up for you, The Razor's Edge by W. Somerset Maugham. This was originally published in 1944. This vintage edition, ebook, Kindle edition that I going to get doesn't have a pretty cover, but the book I'm really looking forward to. I saw the movie version of this, the 1946 movie version of this that had Tyrone Power as the main character, Larry, who is a young man who was just coming out of World War I and very traumatized, and then decides he wants a different life. He goes on this search for a meaningful life, much to the dismay of his fiancée, Isabel, who wants him to get married and go into business and become a sort of a stable, I guess, middle-class person. So yeah, this tells the story of a group of friends, of which Larry, like I said, is the one who goes on the seeker that I'll be reading about. So the next book in the theme of seekers on the list is Look, Homeward, Angel by Thomas Wolfe. This book originally was published in 1929. This is a Southern literature fiction work about a young man who wants a different life than his small southern town, and his family, the life that his family lives. And so this is one of those Southern lit books that I probably was supposed to read earlier. It was discussed in my high school Southern literature, because I'm originally from Arkansas. We had a Southern literature sort of module in high school, but we didn't read this, so I've never read it. So I'm looking forward to this. Next on the list for seekers, it's my Hermann Hesse for the year. At least this one's going to get read. Demian, this book came recommended by several commenters. I had a hard time choosing which Hesse book to read next, but ultimately I decided to choose Demian. I love the opening line of this. This is the story of Emile Sinclair's youth, originally published in 1919. The opening of this novel says, "I wanted only to try to live in obedience to the promptings which come from my true self. Why was that so very difficult?" I hear you, Demian. I hear you. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting Demian read. So that finishes out the theme of seekers. My next theme really is identity. Identity is one of these things that I've been interested in for a while, and I've had several of these books on my radar to read for at least a couple of years, some of them longer, so I'm happy to get through them. But the first one to talk about is Us and Them by David Berreby, published in 2005. This sort of explains how we want to fit into groups, how we want to organize ourselves into groups, and how we want to other people and keep other people out of our group. So this is our group and you're not in it, kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to this very much. Then the next one on the list concerning identity, I heard about this book a couple of years ago now, and Been wanting to get to it for a while. This is called For 2,000 Years by Mihail, Sebastian. This was originally published in 1934 in Romania. This is a young Jewish student who has, I wrote it down here, there's a quote from the book, absolutely definitively alone. A young Jewish student in Romania tries to make sense of a world that has decided he doesn't belong. You know, as the rise of the Nazis in Europe in the 1930s. This is a memoir-ish, I think, from what I gathered, of this young man's experience as he finds himself othered and outcast. All right, so then the next book on the list for themed around identity is A Cut Closer to Whole by Benjamin S. MacEllen, originally published in 2011. This is a story of a man's journey from being Susan, a girl Susan, known as a girl Susan, to his journey then to becoming Ben, and so he's a trans person, and so I really wanted to read something by a trans person, and I had heard of this author elsewhere, and so I chose this one. So I'm hoping that this is going to be interesting. And then a couple of fiction works, New Finnish Grammar by Diego Marani. This was originally published in 2000 in Italian, I believe. This takes place in 1943, World War II. A soldier is wounded and wakes up. When he wakes up, he can't speak, and he has lost all of his memories. And the doctor, who is from Finland, decides he's Finnish and starts teaching him the Finnish language. And then the soldier goes off to Finland to try to discover his past. So it's all about identity and language, I think. So this should be good. Then next I have, find it here for you. This one's a questionable one for me. It seems like a lot of people hate this book, and then some people love it. So it's To Rise Again at a Decent Hour by Joshua Ferris, originally published in 2014. This was shortlisted for the 2014 Man Booker Prize, I gathered. Didn't know that, choosing the book originally, but yeah, so it's a story of a dentist who's a sort of an existential, I guess, crisis. Someone steals his identity online, so I don't know if I'm going to like this. Some people hate it, some people like it. So, but I thought, sometimes just to keep things fresh, we have to take chances on books we may or may not like. So that's sort of one of my roll of the dice books for 2018. So then finally, for this video, my next theme is around the theme of place, because I'm real interested in place. In 2017, I read this book about the making of Washington, D.C., the city of Washington, D.C., and I thought that was fascinating. So I wanted to get some books read about place. So the first one that I chose is Jerusalem by Simon Sebag Montefiore, originally published in 2011. This book usually gets pretty good reviews. It's pretty much a chunker, but I've always been interested in Jerusalem, very ancient city, Eastern Mediterranean. Again, I'm interested in the history of the Mediterranean, as I mentioned earlier, so this sort of fits the bill, so I'm looking forward to this. And then along sort of those same lines, I have Istanbul, A Tale of Three Cities by Bethany Hughes, published in 2016. Istanbul's had three different names. It's been Byzantium, it's been Constantinople, and then finally it's been Istanbul. Another one of these big, ancient, important cities of the Eastern Mediterranean. So I'm looking forward to this very much. And then finally, for the third book under place, you just pull up the cover because I'm going to read this electronically. That is Delphi, A History of the Center of the Ancient World, published in 2014. So yeah, Delphi I went to about 3 years ago, went on vacation. I went to Istanbul at the same time, went to Greece, and I did take a little pilgrimage up to Delphi. I've always been sort of interested in Delphi. It was the Temple of Apollo and the Oracle of Delphi. Delphi was like a cultural center of the world for like 1,000 years. And so I just think it's fascinating. So I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about Delphi and the Temple of Delphi and the Oracle of Delphi. So that is it. That is the 15 works for the first 4 themes. I will follow this video. There will be another video with the remaining 5 themes and the remaining 15 books that are on my priority reading list for 2018. So stay tuned for that. Take care. Bye.